Yeah, guys, very good afternoon to all of you. My name is Ajay Parmar, and all of you know me by my other training sessions, which I have taken on Advanced Excel VBA, Power Query, Web Scraping, MS Access VBA, and this time we're going to actually talk about the use of the M language. What is the M language? The mashup language which we use in the Power Query. So we have a long way to go, and trust me, this is absolutely stunning, fantastic language with the help of which you can control your data almost to the way you want. Right? So we are talking about here the M language. Some people also call it mashup language. Okay, so we also call it M code. Okay, so M code, or you can also say that the use of the M functions. Okay, mashup functions, which means that now the thing is that in order to uh, take the benefit of this course, you must have a good knowledge of a Power Query. And I think the guys, all of you have joined, half of you have already trained by me on the Power Query, and the other guys, as I said that, but I'm repeating this again, that you need to be perfect in the Power Query. Otherwise, this course will not really benefit you. In fact, it will, create a confusion and a fear in your mind. Okay, so, what is a mashup language and why actually we need it? This is something, first of all, we want to understand that, why the M language? Why we want to go and talk about the M code or language, whatever you want to say. And what is the basically the benefit? Because we always talk about the benefit first, how this training is going to benefit me. Why I need to learn the M language. You see that if you guys have working on Excel, obviously that's why you're learning this. You know that there is always a big time difference between the advanced Excel, the front part, and the VBA, the language which we use in that, right? Now through VBA you can do anything on the Excel, right? There are a lot of things which you cannot do in Excel front part. Even if you are a champion, even if you are an Excel expert, there are a lot of things you can't do without the programming, right? So same way, we all know that why we use the Power Query, right? I talked about this before also. Power Query is basically a data structuring, right? To structure the data, to refine the data, we use the Power Query. And why we do that? Obviously, because we want to make a pivot reports on that, or maybe, we need to make some other things as well. I mean, we don't want to make the pivot, but we just want to, get some specific output. So M language, M code, actually, the role it plays is that it makes your data dynamic. I mean, in terms of controlling the data. Now, there are a lot of scenarios where you cannot go and use the Power Query ribbon features, the features which it has. Though we have fabulous features, but if you want to be an expert in the data analysis, you need this language, because then you can just go and write your own syntaxes, and you can just go and mold the data the way you want. Okay, so I like to go and uh, keep this session very simple, very interesting. Yeah, so one thing which I want to tell you, if you don't have any programming knowledge, no worries. If you have a programming knowledge, well, this is additional advantage. You will pick up the pace with me very fast. But as I said, even if you don't have any programming knowledge, you don't have any idea about macros, that's okay. We are going to talk everything from the from the very basics. Okay, so let us start this. First of all, I like to go and talk about that how the Power Query generate the syntaxes, because we need to understand the syntaxes, that when you go and work with the Power Query, what important things we need to understand, because in the coming sessions we will be writing our own syntax. Wow, fantastic. Can you believe that? Can you even write your own formulas in the Power Query? Yes, you can. Okay. So the first thing which I want to tell you is that let's start with the very basic. Let me first of all show you that where that programming language, the M code, actually is written in the Power Query, right? Like in Excel, you know that we go in the developer tab and we click on the Visual Basic. The guys who do not know VBA, pardon me for that, but just if you don't know it, that's absolutely fine, right? So this is where we go and write the program and blah 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 things. We go and write it here, and then we just run it, and the things happens, right? So in the Power Query also we have this sort of whiteboard. Now I'm going to show you that first of all. Let's first of all have a look on that. So as usual, we go in the data and I'm going to create a table. Now this is already a table which I have created, a simple table. Table one, the name of the file is introduction to the mashup, intro mashup. So table is already there. I'm not going to give it any name. It's table one. That's fine. So we go in the data and I go and click on the from table and the range. So we will have the Power Query wizard coming in front of you, as you know that, right? Okay. So finally, we have got the data. As you can see here, I have the serial number, date. There are some sales. We can imagine this in the dollars or any currency. We have the product and we have the category, right? Now, what you have done so far, you have just imported the data in the Power Query window, right? But what happens in the background? Because whatever you do in the Power Query, those all steps get recorded. And this I have mentioned before also in the Power Query session. These are the applied steps, right? I always talked about this source and the change type and the number of the steps which always comes in the front, but I never taken you in the background of this. So this is the series where we are going to check that what happens in the background. Now to see that what happens in the background, what we need to do, first of all, we go in the view option and click on the advanced editor. Okay, so the moment I click on the advanced editor, you find here another whiteboard. It's a small whiteboard, not like VBA, but still, it's like that board. And here we go and write the program. Okay, here we write and use our functions and whatever the automation we have to do. Now look at this. Now, initially, this line, all this stuff looks very scary, but this is not really. Once we get into this, and I'm here to make you a master, trust me on that. Just go and watch this, listen to this lecture again and again. No problems. I'm going to give you some assignments also. Maybe we will do right in the class. Never mind. Now, first of all, what it says, you see that we have the numbering 1 2 3 4 5, right? And we have this. So by default, this is everything. And there is a display option also here. And you see that display line numbers. I think this is by default always there. If you don't do this, if you uncheck it, you will not have this numbering coming. So I think this is very, you know, useful for us because this tells you that on which line basically you are. So I always make sure that this should be on. By default, I think this is always check marked. But in case if you don't see, just go in this window and click on this display line numbers. Now, what is the concept here? You see, in the M language, Power Query uses the functions. It has so many functions, so many functions. Power Query has so many functions. Obviously we can't cover all the functions. One, because of the, obviously we don't have that much of time, because if I start covering all the functions, it will take, I think, maybe 5 6 months, maybe more than that. And the another thing is that I do not need to learn all the functions, right? I need to learn what actually what my data demands. And if my data demands something which I do not know right away, if I know, if my concepts are clear, if my fundamentals are clear, you can just go and check that in the Google, right? So before I talk about this, I want to take you to the Microsoft website for the Power Query. So when you go and type in the Google that Power Query M code functions, you find there the link, and the link is already here. You can see that. Just Google it, okay? You find here that this is what they say. Power Query M formula language. So here there are so many functions. You see that, right? So these are all the categories. Now, for example, if I like to go and check some functions related to the table, maybe I can filter it and maybe I can start typing here, the table. Look at this. Okay. So once I press the table and I press dot, you see table add column, table add index column, table add join column, table add key, and you can scroll it down. So depending upon the projects, we will go and discuss these functions. If you know 3 4 5 functions, you can just go and use the other functions as well, because fundamentally, concept remains the same. The only thing which you need to understand is that where this function has to be used, and that's obviously going to take some time. So these are all the table related functions. Table related functions means, well, for example, if you want to rename some table column, then what will you do? Can you do that using the Power Query? Normal Power Query, I mean, you can't do that, right? The moment I say RE, you see that it says that remove the columns, remove first, then remove last, then remove rows. So you find here, lot of functions, right? Table dot rename. So if I click on this table dot rename columns, this will take you to the syntax, right? So this is a syntax, and this is where the example has been given. Now, honestly speaking, I think Microsoft needs to work a little bit on the examples, because as a beginner, examples are little difficult to understand. But I'll help you. Obviously, I'm here to help you. So what I'm trying to tell you is that if you know the writing these functions, you can do whatever you want. You can control the data, isn't it? And this is something you can't do it using the Power Query front part. Okay, so when I say front part, right, I mean that without any M language, without any M code. Okay, so we will come back to this, all the examples, but right now I just wanted to show you that you can see that there are so many table related functions, right? There are so many: table skip, table split, table single row. There are very, these are very, very useful functions, right? Same way, there are other functions also related to the list, related to the record. Now I'm gonna talk about record list later. Okay, this is just the overview. Okay, let me come back to the advanced editor. So why I was telling you about that, because if you look at this excel dot current workbook, this is also one of the function. If you go back to your this, you know filter by title, and you start typing here excel dot, you see that you find here excel dot current workbook and excel dot workbook function. And I have talked about these functions in the Power Query, the front part also. Right there I talked about this, because these functions helps us in dealing with the folders and the multiple tables if you have. Anyways, let's not get into that. But the point is, what I'm saying that Power Query uses all these functions, and if you know that how we can use these functions, you can just go and mold the manage the data the way you want. Okay, so if you look at this, the Power Query window, the first step the Power Query has used is excel dot current workbook, and then there is this function open parenthesis close parenthesis and the name of the table. If you remember, the name of the table was table 1, and then the content. So we want the table 1 content. So this is how basically it is written. Now we have seen this many times, I'm sure, because if you are working on a Power Query, this is not something new. You always find this in the formula bar. Now this is the complete. Now you might be asking me, what is the difference between this window, the formula bar, and this advanced editor? Now see this. This shows what the specific step you have selected. If I have selected the source, what my source step refers to. My source step refers to this function, and you can see here source equals to this complete line. But what about the next? I want to see everything step by step. So you can't go and use this fx for that, because the point is, if you go and click on the change type, the another step, this will show you the formula which is used in this specific step. You can't see both the steps at the same time, right? So that's why we like to go and check the entire history, what the Power Query has generated. So you always go in the advanced editor. Now this does not mean that, obviously, if you have to write some function, you can write here also, you can write here also. I will be talking about that, right? But the point is, here we have a full view, and you can always go and increase the width of this. Okay, so the first thing which you understood, this is the editor and this is the formula bar, and this shows you what you go and select in the front part, which step. Now these all steps which Power Query writes for you, you always find these steps as source and change type. Power Query always uses these words, and these words equals to what? This source is referring to basically this entire syntax, this entire expression. Excel dot current workbook is a function, but if you talk about the expression, this entire line is an expression which returns something. What is the formula? Formula or function is excel dot current workbook. Function does some job, but when the function is combined with other things, it becomes an expression. Okay, so this is the first line. Now you would ask me that what is this let? What is this in? You see that, like in VB editor, when you write any program, what you do? The very first thing you do is you write your subword, sub, and then you write the macro name, and then you write the code, and at the end of the day, you go and write what? You go and write end sub. Okay, so for non-programmers, this is how we write, in VBA. I'm not gonna obviously take you to the VBA editor, but this is how we write sub test, and we close it and we press enter, and then here we write the program. Let's say we have written the program, and then at the end of the day, we go and write end sub. Okay, this means that the VBA knows that this is where the macro stops. at the end sub. Okay, same way, guys. You talk about any programming language, they all have their own keywords. Same way, the Power Query uses let and in word. You got the point now, which means that whenever you want to start anything, you start with the let statement, right? And then when everything is done, in order to get that output back, you go and write in, and then after the in, you write one line, which is what? Which is the last step, which is the last step name. So you always find in the Power Query that these steps always change if you go and add some more, steps over here. Now I'm going to show you, for example, if I just close this. Now let's say I want to do something. What I want to do, maybe I want to just go and change this date formatting to simple date. So how I can do it? Well, I can transform this, I can say that I want the date. So I say date only, right? Now, once you have done this step, now this says, are you sure you want to insert a step? So basically I've selected the source. So it is asking me if I want to insert the step, but ideally I don't want to insert. What I want to do is I want to add this as a last step. So let me click on the change type, and now I go and, do the same step. So I go in the home tab and I say that data type has to be, the date. So I select the date. Okay, cool. Now you see that. So this says that, do you want to replace the, would you like to replace the existing conversion or preserve the existing? So I think basically the Power Query has, done its own also. The data type changes. Power Query always does that. It basically converts the numbers to numbers and text to text. So maybe I can say, yes, I want to replace it, or maybe add new step. Let me add new step. We are just learning. So you see that the new step also shows me the name as changed type 1. And here the date is changed. And you see that which formula the Power Query has used to do that. Table dot transform column types, right? Now obviously I will not go and use these type of functions because very few occasions you like to go and change the data type, and if you have to do it, you can do it easily with the Power Query. You don't have to go and write the M function for that. We use the M functions where the Power Query cannot help us. Getting the point? But in case if you want to use it, you can use it. We will see that. But right now there are three steps. So can you tell me now, guys, if I take you back to the advanced editor, what do you want to see there? I'll tell you. I know that it's just a beginning. You will find three steps there. Source equals to some function with some expression, then change type equals to something something, and then change type 1 equals to something something, and this is all going to be a part of let statement. Can you tell me that what will happen in the in statement? What will be written? Change type 1, because the last step always is added, because this is what you need, right? You're following all these steps one by one. Why? Because your data demands it. So obviously, this step, I want to refer it. So when I go to the advanced editor, you find here the step is automatically changed to change type 1. You see that? Previously, it was change type, right? Now, same way, if I add, let's say, one more step, and by the way, if I go and just delete it, of course, now if I delete this step, for example, I cross this, okay? If I go and cross this step, so I just go and say that I don't want this, so I delete this, right click on this, and I say I want to delete this. Now, what will happen in the Power Query? Obviously, there will be only two steps. So you're getting the point. Power Query will go and change the syntax accordingly. Whatever you do in the front part, that front part actually is, going to be recorded here by the Power Query engine. Okay. Now you see that here we have a change type 1, right? Now, what I'm going to do is I want to do something nice. Maybe I want to, let's say, go and say, I want to add one more column. And in that column, I want to multiply or maybe add 10 to this. So what I do is add column. This we have discussed this many times. So I simply go and say that, add column. And I go in the standard and I say, I want to add. What do you want to add? Well, I want to add maybe, let's say, a number called 1. Okay. So let me go and add 1 to it. So I go and write here 1 and just say, okay, you see that add the column will be added and there is a new formula table dot add column. And no wonder if you go back in the Power Query and you try to figure it out that what this function basically does, obviously it adds the column. You can go and search for this function. So what is the Power Query doing? It is adding the functions, right? It It does not need your help. It does not need anyone's help. It knows that what is the user, the step the user is doing, and how that step can be converted to a syntax. And to convert it into that syntax, and to convert that step into a syntax, Power Query is just using one of its functions from this big time library. You're getting the point now, right? So here we are using table.add column, and this is what it has done. Simple. Now we're going to check in the view and advanced editor. So you see that how the Power Query has written the program. We start with the let, and then these bunch of lines are coming. So Power Query added inserted addition. This is a standard step. Power Query likes to, you know, follow the same rules when it comes to writing the step names. What I mean to say is that if you go and work with in your Power Query in this English language, you find here the same syntax. You don't find here something called a different header. I mean, whenever you go and add something, when you go and add something, you always find this step inserted addition. Okay, so what this does, you see that it's using a function called table.add column and then blah blah stuff. This is something we will go and talk about it later. But however, you can see that here the plus one is adding. Where the plus one is adding, which header, which column field, it's getting added in the sales done. So sales done is a field, that is why it has the square bracket. And you would ask me what this each word means. Well, if you see that the group statement, if you have seen the group statement in the Power Query, each actually means that it is going to work on every row, right? This first row, second row, third row. In Power Query, we generally don't write these. We don't mention them as rows. We mention them as records. If you're a guy who knows Access or any database, there we generally refer these, rows as a record. So this is a record, first record, which has I think 5 or 6 columns, and this is a column name, or you can say field name. What is the field name? Serial number. What is the second field name? Date. What is the third field name? Sales done. So now you know the difference, right? There are few terms which you should know for those people who do not know any programming and the database knowledge. You see, if I ask you what is a table, what is a table name, what would you say? Table one, right? If I ask you that, all right, so can you tell me what is written in the third record of this table? What will you say? You will go here. You say that 3, and then the date, which is 5th of January, and then 130 beer in stock, and 131, whatever. If I ask you, can you tell me the how many columns or how many fields I have? Then what are you gonna say? You're gonna say that okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 6 fields. If I ask you that, can you tell me the field number of a category, then you say that field category is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the fifth index, right? So if I ask you that, do we have any field name by the name of sales done? Yes, it is there, right? So these are all the field names, okay? And inside these field names, these are all the field values: 1 to 8, cheese, burger, beer, out stock, in stock. These are all called the field values. Okay, I'll write it down after the session. Don't worry. Or you can even go and, listen to this lecture again. Not a problem, as all of you are recording. But the point is here I'm mentioning is that after the in statement, you always find the last step. Now, here there are two things I like to go and clear. Is this mandatory for me to write the last step here? Can I not write source here? Well, you want to do that? Okay, let's give it a try. So let's just go and do it. Okay, it's a good question. So if you go and write here, let's say the source. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write here the source. Okay, so I simply go and write the source. Okay, this is how I'm just going to write the source. Got the point? Now what will happen now? Let's go and check that. I close this. The moment you close this, now I shouldn't have closed this. My bad. Again, one more learning for you. Basically, when you go and write anything, you have to say done. Don't close it. So what I do is once again I go and delete this. And we go and write here the source. You see that the source started coming, right? So just press the tab key or maybe click on this. I press the tab key and this is where it is. Now let me click on the done. Okay, don't close it. Click on the done. The moment you are done, you see that what happened. Oh boy, there's something going on here. And if you look at this, what happened, all the steps are gone and it says the table one. Why? You see, the point is when you set the source, basically these lines will not come into action because after the in whatever you go and write, Power Query will show you that specific thing. So when you set the source, what is the source, you know, step doing? It is simply showing you the data of the table one, right? So you have the data of the table one. Do you see here that additional column which we added, where we added one to the sales done? You don't see that. Why? Because what you returned is, that is very important. You returned the first step, and the first step, what it does, it only shows the table. So this is how it is. Now, what if I go and write here change type one? Well, you can go and write it that as well. So I press the the hash, and you see the moment you press hash, it starts coming. I said this before also, dear student, but for those who are joining in this series only, uh, this intelligence is available now. It wasn't before. It happened, I think, in September. And so you must have this intelligence because this makes your life very easy. Otherwise, you will have to type each and everything by your own. And chances are high, you will feel frustrated because Power Query is a sensitive language. Right? So I'm just waiting for the day when this is not going to be case sensitive. That will be the fantastic day of my life. But anyways, never mind, because intelligence in itself is such a strong thing. Okay, like in the programming we always have the intelligence. Okay, so I press the tab key. The moment I press the tab key, it gets inserted. Now can you tell me, so who is going to tell me now what will happen if I click on the done? Who will tell me what will you see in the Power Query? Hmm? Yeah, Anil, please tell me. Absolutely. You will find the value of this step, which is that it is transforming the column source, which means this source basically the first step, it's basically changing the type of the date to type date. Okay, this is what it is going to do. Right now, the date is in the, you can see there are some hourly format also, but if you remember, we added this step when we said that, in the home tab, we need to go and change this date to date. So this will what will happen when I click on the done, this will be formatted as date only. There will be no hourly minutes format, right? But there will be no inserted addition happening here, which means the column will not be added. So if I click on done, you see what's going to happen. This is what is going to happen, right? So this is what exactly we are going to deal with. We should be able to understand the Power Query, how it structures the thing, right? So when the Power Query writes this syntax, or even when you do, almost every time, 99% of the time, you always follow the last step. Otherwise, tell me, guys, why you need to write that step if you don't want to use it, isn't it? Now, for example, I'll give you a very simple example. You have a task in Excel. Maybe let's say you want to email an attachment using the program, or maybe manually. Let's say you have a data, you want to make some pivots, and those pivots you want to attach in an email and you want to send out to your manager. Now tell me one thing, is it possible to send out the email without making a pivot? It is not. Is it possible to make a pivot without opening the Excel file? No. So what is the step one? Step one is open the Excel workbook. What is the step two? Step two is go in your database and create a pivot. What is the step three? Just use that pivot in a extra new file and just go and save that file, close it, and that file in the next step you go and email it. So what do you need? What is the output? The output is obviously, the last step. So that is why if we don't need this step, if we don't want this step, then why we are writing it? So that is why, it makes a sense that I have been doing 10 steps, and there is some reason for that. All the steps are intralinked. They are dependent on each other. I'll just tell you. But the point is, the last step which I want, the last step which I have written, obviously that is what I want to see because that is the final output. This is where, I like to say that, yes, this is what I needed it. Right? So this is the reason the Power Query uses always the last step. But having said so, in the coming times, we may when we go and write the program, when we will have a very good level, you may be requiring a situation where you have added 10, 15 steps, and all of a sudden you want to go back to maybe third step. So you can do it, right? It's fun, So I click on the done. The moment you click on the done, you see that you get your all the steps back. This is how it is, and this is here it is, right? So this is what you need to understand. Now, I was talking about the intra-linking. I was telling you that these all steps are, dependent on each other. Well, obviously, even you know that, if you don't have a source, then where will you go and change the date? And if you don't have this step, then how will you go and insert the addition? Isn't it? Right? Though inserted addition has nothing to do with the change type because change type was simply on the date. But the point is, I mean, we are going step by step, you know. But how you can show this to somebody in the advanced editor? If I ask you, okay, I got the point. All the steps are, intra-linked. They are related to with each other. But how can you prove this in the Power Query? Then what are you gonna say? You tell that, look, this is the first step I have written, right? Whatever this first step is doing, this is written over here. Now this is not just a step, understand. I said this before also in the Power Query. This step returns something. What it returns, it always returns a table of your choice, what you wanted. So this table is now going to be used here. Can you see that? This is called the table name. This is a source, I know, but what is a source? Source actually represents a table, which is table one. So whatever the source step is doing, what is the source step is doing? If you click on the source step, what it does, it actually shows you this data. So this data is equals to source. Now, if I have to change the date, the formatting, right? Obviously, I will have to tell the Power Query that, look, I want to go and change the date to this date to a date format only, but obviously on which data, on which table, on the source. So that is the reason in the second step you find that the Power Query uses the previous step. This means that the output, whatever the output you have got it in the previous step. Now in the same way, the next line, the third step, is using the previous step. This is how it is. So there you can now establish the relationship, because you see with every step your data is changing, isn't it? Right? So whatever the data is changed, that is what you need to refer in the next step. So this is how it is done, right? This is how it is done. You're getting the point. So all these steps are intra-related. They always use the previous steps. And since this line is now, I mean, the last line, that's why you don't find further, use of this line. So finally, we stop in the in and we just go and write insert addition. Let in, they're all in the small letters, right? So you're getting the point. What is the next thing you need to understand in this? So you know now that all the steps we can find out in the advanced editor, and all the steps actually follows each other, right? The next step always follows the previous step, right? Because on that specific step, we want to take some action. When I say step, you can say that it refers to a table, a new table, with some changes. One more thing which you need to understand, which is what? Do you see that the comma is coming here after the line? The comma is coming and there is no comma here. There's no comma here, guys. There is no comma here as well. Why? Now, if I go and just go and say that I don't want this comma, this does not make any sense. Really? Can you go and check that here? What it says? Token comma expected. So Power Query will tell you, this wizard advanced editor, that there is some problem. Now maybe as a beginner you may overlook this. You may not, you know you may have not seen this and you say, okay, let's go and done. The first thing is, why would you go and delete the comma? But we need to understand this, because when you go and write your own programs, this situation can come that you forgot to mention the comma. So what it says, expression syntax error, common, token comma expected, right? So immediately, this is not really a good help. You won't be able to find out anything over here. Just go back in that advanced editor, and the moment you go and come back to here, you just go and say that, uh, uh, I mean, you have a look on this line, and this basically line shows the problem here, the change type one, right? Basically, it means that by writing the comma, you tell the Power Query that this is the end of the line. So Power Query picks up that entire line, and obviously, if it makes sense, it executes. Right now, what you're doing, you know what? You are saying that from the source up till this line, there is a one single line, and you know that that is not possible. because Power Query sees the comma here. If the Power Query sees the comma here, Power Query will say that this is the entire syntax, which is wrong. You know that both are different syntax. So that's why you need to go and mention the comma here in at the end of the every line. When you go and take the help of the Power Query, the by default, whatever the syntax is, it generates. You don't have to touch this part. You will never find the problem. But I'm preparing you for the coming sessions where you will go and write your own functions. That is how it is. Now you would ask me, so why it is not coming here? Well, as a rule, in the last line, the comma never comes. As simple as that. If you go and put the comma here, you find here that the comma cannot be preceding. You can't write the comma here. Remember this point. Neither you can go and write the comma here. Here you just go and write the only the last step. You got the point now, right? So I'll show you one thing now. For example, I want to go and write something. I want to add one more step. For example, right now you see that this is the last step, so there's no comma. So let me do one thing. The moment I remove the comma, everything is coming here. Okay. Now let's say what I want to do is maybe I want to go and combine the product and let's say the category. Okay. So what I do is I simply go and select them, and I say in the add column I just want to merge them. Merge column. Okay. So we merge it. Now the moment I merge it, do you want to keep any separator? Oh well, no, I don't want to keep any separator. So we have merged them. Now, if you go back to the advanced editor, what do you want to find? Obviously, there will be one additional line. You know that inserted merge column. This is a step name, and here Power Query uses the same function table add column. But if you look at this, now this line has coming with the comma, and this line does not have any comma, right? Because now this is the last line, and obviously now you know that the last step is the inserted merge column, right? This is how it is. Okay, so these are the rules. You need to understand this. Now, what if I want to go and create these steps by my own understanding? For example, I want to say that, change type, inserted, addition, I want to rename them. You all know that you can just go and right click on this and you can rename this, right? The moment I rename this will be done, and in the advanced editor, the changes will happen, right? But I don't want to go and rename like this, because now we are learning the programming. So I create the copy of this, Control C and Control V, and let us do the fun over here. So what I do is I go in the advanced editor. So let's say I want to say that, the source, I want to rename this. Let's say I want to rename this as data source. Okay. You can do that. You can do that, guys. Okay. So I write here data source, but remember one thing. You tell me, if I just go and click done, what will happen? Hmm? What will happen? Will you get the result or will you get some problem? Yes, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Fantastic. Yes, you are absolutely right, Anil. You will get the error, guys. You know why? Because the second function is using the source, the last step. So if you just want to have fun, just go and click on done. Well, I always learn from the errors, and you always find me saying that never ever afraid of the errors. Let them come because they make you strong. If you can solve the error, remember the next time it will not dare to disturb you, isn't it? So what it says, look at the error. It says the import source matches no export. Did you miss a module reference? It means that there is some reference which you are missing. I know this is not such a crystal clear error, but eventually you will start getting the hang of it. You will start getting the understanding. Okay, so the point is very simple. If I click on the advanced editor, we have to make sure that if I'm going to rename something, then we have to go and change that here also. Obviously, because source step does not exist. So I go and write here data source. The moment you go and do that, I think the next step is the insert addition, and it's using the change type one, which is absolutely right because you have not changed this. So if I click on the done, now what should happen? Can you see that? You have your answer back, but look at this. This is now showing the data source. So what I do is just for my own story, because I love stories. I love understanding the things, by kind of, listening to those things, as a story, because that way it is not just an interesting thing, but also gives you a lot of understanding. So now what I do is I don't want to keep this change type one. What I do is I want to keep this something very simple. I don't want these hashes. I don't want these double quotes. I'll tell you that why that double quotes and the hashes the Power Query writes. But if I have to write it, what I do is I write that, date type changed, date type format. For example, this is what I do, and I'm going to write it. And obviously, to save the time, let's not click on the done. First, let's go and delete this and just go and control wait, right? Now, when the first time, you will start doing this, you have to do the same step today at home when you go and, go from this session, guys, because otherwise you will not be able to learn it. You see, when you see me doing something, you think that you are getting everything. Wow, great. But you have to go and do this same step in your Power Query editor also. Only then you will be able to understand. Okay. So now I have done this date type format. And then for the insert edition, I want to say that, what I want to do, I want to add, as you know, I want to say that adding sales, adding sales. Let's say this is what I want to keep, right? Adding sales. Okay, so here in the, the very next step where you have used the Power Query has used insert edition, we will go and delete this. And here we will go and write adding sales. The moment you type adding sales, IntelliSense will start showing you the step. Just press the tab key, right? Or you can type it if you have more time, right? But I like to use the tab key. Now, once this is done, can you tell me now, are we done with this? Yes, we are done with this. But the thing is, I also want to change this also. Inserted merged column. So here what I do is I simply go and say that merge columns, right? Merge columns. Now, why I'm doing this, guys? You know why? Because I want to tell you how the things are working and how you can control them. Obviously, why would you go and rename that? You don't want to rename them. Maybe in some of the cases you like to go and rename it. Who knows? But the point is, if we go and do this way, we will have more confidence, right? This will give you the first session will give you a good understanding of the Power Query, because once you start typing in, doing the changes over here, you feel great amount of confidence and you will be ready for the upcoming sessions, right? So that's why I'm telling you. Obviously, now the last step which we have to do is we have to go and write the same step. So I just go and press M, and you see that I start getting here all the help, all the applied steps, and also the other functions. We don't want anything. I want the first thing, so I say merge columns. Now we are done with this, and I've taken care of. I mean, there are all the commas over here. This says no syntax error, and let's go and click on the done. Right now, let's go and check that. Oh, amazing! Yeah, now you can see that you have been able to change this. Now again, I'm repeating. You could have right click and rename it, but it's a different feeling, when you go in the editor and you do that, right? This is how it is. If you go and rename anything, in the Power Query, for example, let's say we rename this, I rename this, and then I'll have a question. I say, adding sales, I'm going to put the underscore, okay? And I click outside. Now, if you look at the merge column, it still shows you the output. You know why? Because if you go back to your advanced editor, the Power Query has not only changed this adding sales to adding underscore sales, but here also the Power Query has changed it. Same step which we did. You're getting the point. So Power Query is very intelligent, obviously, right? Power Query knows that if you have to go and change the name here, it is going to be changed here also. So now you even know that these steps can also be renamed in the Power Query editor. Okay, so now the last point which I was talking, that why we use the hash, in the Power Query, you saw that it uses the double quotes and the hash. This is something we will talk in the next lecture. Okay, till then, whatever we have covered, please go and make yourself comfortable with that. Thank you so much.